This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Okay, starting with the brief, Apple finally gave in to pressure from the EU, meaning that the iPhone will add support for RCS messaging starting in 2024. This is basically the open iMessage equivalent pushed by Google and by the GSM Alliance, and it can do most of the same things, including high-quality files, read receipts, typing indicators, etc. And it will replace SMS and MMS on iPhones, but not iMessage, which will continue to live alongside with RCS. You will continue to be a green bubble as an Android user, but now iPhone users will have to look down on you only because they think you're poor and not also because somehow your communication with them is broken. And talking of which, Nothing has just announced Nothing Chat this week, which is an app that lets you use iMessage from their Android phones. You'll be required to enter your Apple ID login, and then the service will basically log you into a remote Mac Mini in some server farm to relay your messages. I'd be pretty hesitant to give my login info to my Apple account to a client like this, plus of course Apple can also try to just shut this down if they want to, so I would not use it for anything really private or anything really important for sure, and instead I'll just embrace the green bubble life, or literally any other messenger. Next, Microsoft announced its first ever proper silicon in a while in the form of the Azure Maya 100 and the Cobalt 100. These are ARM-based server chips, with one being for general purpose computing and the other being a dedicated AI accelerator designed to take on NVIDIA. Interestingly, you can't buy either of these chips, you can only rent them via Azure. And then also this week, Samsung unofficially confirmed when Android 14 would come to its devices, and believe it or not, basically all modern Samsung phones should get the update within about a month of the newest Samsung flagship. That is a pretty impressive pace. And then, moving on, the Wireless Power Consortium says that the first Qi 2 devices are arriving in time for the holidays, and that over 100 devices are nearly finished with their certification and are testing to launch soon, including the iPhone 15 series, which will be the first Qi 2 certified phones. That means basically MagSafe coming to any device that you want pretty soon. Nice! And next up, good guy Apple extended emergency SOS via satellite for an additional free year for existing iPhone 14 users. This was supposed to eventually turn into a paid feature because it actually costs money to provide as a service to Apple, but I guess it's just really difficult to not give it to people who are in need. Like, imagine you have to make an emergency call and Apple goes like, yeah, sorry, you didn't pay the $5 a month subscription, so can't really help you here. And then in AI news, Google announced that their new AI meteorology model, called GraphCast, has massively outperformed conventional weather forecasting methods in predicting global weather conditions up to 10 days in advance, and they did so in 90% of the metrics that were predicted. Oh, and the AI also uses about 1,000 times less energy than traditional methods. Wow. Google says that their AI is not quite ready to replace traditional forecasting methods just yet, but I say all hail our AI weatherman. And in funny mistakes this week, Asus apologized for accidentally printing Evangelion, not Evangelion, on their new $700 special edition motherboards. Not a huge deal, I guess, but still kind of funny, and at least the people can get some replacements if they want them. Okay, and for my first story of the week, we got our first ever glimpse at the first ever Xiaomi car because of some regulatory filings with the Chinese government. The car is called the SU7. It is obviously an EV with 650 horsepower. It has a LiDAR array on the roof of the car for presumed autonomy or safety features, and it should start selling as soon as early next year. And what I found funny is that there will be a base SU7 and then an SU7 Pro and an SU7 Max in a classic phone naming scheme, and the higher end models will get, for example, more premium battery chemistries. And at this point, I'm kind of expecting a spec sheet, like what Snapdragon chip it runs, what the IP rating is, what the refresh rate of the screen is, that kind of stuff. Give me the tech specs. Also in phone maker fashion, the car is actually made not by Xiaomi, but by a contract manufacturer called the Beijing Automotive Group, or BAIC, which not only makes cars under its own brand, but is also the joint venture partner for Mercedes and Hyundai in China. And while all of this was happening, car maker Polestar also just had their upcoming phone leaked this week too. This to me looked like a rebranded phone from the Chinese phone brand Meizu, and as I was wondering how that would make sense, I remembered that Meizu was recently bought by Geely, the Chinese parent company of Polestar, which now makes a whole lot of sense seeing the car maker's phone ambitions. And if you're now wondering why all the phone makers are trying to make cars and all the car makers are trying to make phones all of a sudden, then I not only predicted this exact thing happening in a video about 3 years ago, but in that video I also explained the whole logic behind it. So if you want to see that, check it out at the link in the description. Oh, and fun fact, Apple recently filed a patent that would let you use your Vision Pro headset to see outside of a car, maybe an Apple car even, with no windows, which is somehow a hilarious pun about operating systems and also a hilarious Black Mirror-like picture in my head. Literally an Apple car with no windows. Okay, and for my second story of the week, man oh man do I love a good antitrust trial, because we get so many juicy corporate secrets that we'd never be able to see otherwise, and this time it is Google's turn to feel really uncomfortable about their trial. So first, a Google witness this week accidentally blurted out during its trial that Apple gets a 36% cut of its Safari search deal. And this is despite both Google and Apple specifically requesting that this detail remain confidential, because a lot could go wrong. And indeed, according to Bloomberg Law, Google's attorney, quote, visibly cringed at the reveal in court. So first of all, I'm very happy that visibly cringed is terminology that a serious legal publication would use in this day and age, but beyond that, this whole thing actually puts Google into a really uncomfortable negotiating position as well. We know from previous trials that even the most loyal Android phone brands like Motorola and Nokia only get a 12% revenue share from Google Search, even after giving Google full exclusivity for all key functions on their phones and also a commitment to not have a rival app store installed. This means that Apple gets 3 times the amount of revenue shared with them from each dollar that Google earns from each of these platforms than even the most hardcore pro-Google brands out there. That is pretty rough. But this week we also learned that Samsung has a special deal too, where instead of a classic revenue share model like all the other brands, they got a lump sum of $8 billion over 4 years to keep Google's search engine, voice assistant, and Play Store as their defaults on the Galaxy devices. That sounds like a lot, and it is definitely more than what other Android brands are making, but it is still only $2 billion versus the $18 billion that Apple is making from their ecosystem, even if that also includes a small part for the Mac. And I think there are 2 main reasons for Apple getting such a better deal than anyone else. First, Android phone brands just get all of Android for free, so I guess a lower rate kind of makes sense as a sort of payment for the operating system. But second, and more importantly, only Apple actually has leverage. With Apple Maps, they have shown that they absolutely can replace core Google services if they want to, and they are the only phone maker who could conceivably build a pretty good search engine if they really tried. Well, I guess Samsung also has some amount of leverage, just to a much lesser degree, which is why they are the only ones on the Android side with another sweetheart deal of their own. But everyone else has very little leverage and hence very low rates. Still, with all the numbers being public now, I bet a lot of Android brands will be asking some pretty uncomfortable questions from Google, like, why are you paying our competitor 3 times more than you are paying us, who are supposed to be your partner in this? Okay, and for my third story of the week, Microsoft finally admitted what we all knew already, specifically that Bing is a terrible brand, and if they want to make a big splash in this new AI world, they really need a new face for it.
Search, as we know of it, is changing, and we are all in. Bing Chat is now Copilot.
And that's exactly what they did, now officially calling their generative AI tools simply Copilot, as announced at Microsoft Ignite this week. Goodbye Bing Chat and Bing Image Creator and all the other things. So now there's a website at copilot.microsoft.com, which is a much cleaner way to access this than by having to dig through Bing's search UI to find your way to the AI. Fun fact, Copilot is the website of a random, relatively small startup, and from what I can tell, they only raised about $10 million so far. That is basically pocket change for Microsoft, so I bet that this tech startup will get a pretty lucrative offer from Microsoft for this domain soon. Anyway, this new brand makes the tie into Copilot on Windows much clearer, and Copilot is a pretty perfect name for this kind of product in my opinion. Definitely much better than having Bing showing up in Skype or Teams or other Microsoft apps, and hey, Microsoft has a pretty compelling product here by basically giving you the otherwise paid GPT-4 for free, just with some small tweaks. Do you have a favorite AI assistant? If yes, which one is it? Let me know down in the comments. And hey, do you want to learn how these large language models actually work on like a more fundamental level? If yes, then check out the fantastic How Large Language Models Work course over on Brilliant. Like any Brilliant course, it is a fantastic deep dive from beginner to advanced levels with real practical examples that break down deep technical knowledge into bite-sized chunks so you can actually learn and practice them right away so you remember them. Brilliant is a fantastic platform for learning STEM skills online, including various computer science topics, but also physics, maths, biology, chemistry, and more. Brilliant's special sauce in all of this is actually their focus on interactivity. This means that complicated science topics are learned in little sprints and always followed up by a quick practice exercise that really drives the concepts home much more effectively than just passively learning them. You can get a 30-day free trial at brilliant.org/TFC, and the first 200 people who sign up using that link will also get 20% off their annual premium subscription if they choose to get one. So happy learning, check them out, and I'll see you next Friday.